The bright summer sun shone over London as crowds of people stood outside Westminster Abbey. Many had been waiting since early morning. Some even slept there overnight with chairs and warm drinks. This was a special day that everyone had marked on their calendars. The annual Commonwealth service was happening, and the royal family would be there together. This did not happen often, so people were very excited. Men and women of all ages lined the streets. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. Old ladies held small flags to wave. Everyone wanted to see the royals up close. The police had put up barriers to keep the crowds back, and security guards with earpieces walked around looking serious. "They're coming soon," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. People started to push forward, trying to get the best spot. Phones and cameras were held high in the air, ready to take pictures that would be shared with friends and family later. The excited chatter of the crowd suddenly changed. A hush fell over everyone as they saw the line of black cars approaching. These were not normal cars. They were shiny, expensive, and had small flags on the front. Everyone knew who was inside. The first car stopped right in front of the red carpet that led into the Abbey. A tall security man opened the car door. Prince William stepped out first. He stood straight and tall in his dark blue suit. His short hair was neatly combed, and he had a friendly smile on his face. People clapped and cheered when they saw him. William was well liked, and many people thought he would make a good king one day. William turned back to the car and held out his hand. The crowd held their breath. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, took his hand and stepped out. She wore a beautiful blue dress that matched her eyes. Her long brown hair moved slightly in the breeze. She wore simple but elegant jewelry that sparkled in the sunlight. Kate, as many people called her, looked every bit the future queen. The crowd went wild with excitement. Phones flashed everywhere as people tried to get pictures. William and Kate stood side by side, waving to the crowd with warm smiles. They had done this many times before. They knew exactly how to stand, how to wave, and how to make everyone feel like they were being seen. But then something happened that nobody expected. A small head peeked out from the car. Princess Charlotte, who was 10 years old, stepped onto the red carpet. Unlike her parents who wore dark, formal clothes, Charlotte had on a bright yellow dress. It had little sunflowers sewn around the bottom. Her light brown hair was not in the usual royal style, but in 2 neat braids tied with yellow ribbons. Charlotte blinked in the bright sunlight and looked around at the huge crowd. For a moment, she seemed surprised by how many people were there. Then her face broke into a big smile that showed her missing tooth on one side. This was not the practiced royal smile that her parents had. It was the real happy smile of a child. The crowd went quiet for a second, then burst into even louder cheers. Charlotte was a favorite with the public. She had a way of being both royal and real at the same time. People loved that about her. As Charlotte stood between her famous parents, her eyes moved across the crowd. She seemed to be looking for something or someone. Then she spotted an old woman standing near the front. The woman had white hair and held a small bunch of daisies in her wrinkled hands. Something about this woman caught Charlotte's attention. Without warning and breaking all royal rules, Charlotte suddenly left her parents' side and ran toward the old woman. The security guards looked shocked and quickly moved to follow her. William and Kate froze, not sure what their daughter was doing. The bright summer sun shone over London as crowds of people stood outside Westminster Abbey. Many had been waiting since early morning. Some even slept there overnight with chairs and warm drinks. This was a special day that everyone had marked on their calendars. The annual Commonwealth service was happening, and the royal family would be there together. This did not happen often, so people were very excited. Men and women of all ages lined the streets. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. Old ladies held small flags to wave. Everyone wanted to see the royals up close. The police had put up barriers to keep the crowds back, and security guards with earpieces walked around looking serious. "They're coming soon," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. People started to push forward, trying to get the best spot. Phones and cameras were held high in the air, ready to take pictures that would be shared with friends and family later. The excited chatter of the crowd suddenly changed. A hush fell over everyone as they saw the line of black cars approaching. These were not normal cars. They were shiny, expensive, and had small flags on the front. Everyone knew who was inside. The first car stopped right in front of the red carpet that led into the abbey. A tall security man opened the car door. Prince William stepped out first. He stood straight and tall in his dark blue suit. His short hair was neatly combed, and he had a friendly smile on his face. People clapped and cheered when they saw him. William was well liked, and many people thought he would make a good king one day. William turned back to the car and held out his hand. The crowd held their breath. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, took his hand and stepped out. She wore a beautiful blue dress that matched her eyes. Her long brown hair moved slightly in the breeze. She wore simple but elegant jewelry that sparkled in the sunlight. Kate, as many people called her, looked every bit the future queen. The crowd went wild with excitement. Phones flashed everywhere as people tried to get pictures. William and Kate stood side by side, waving to the crowd with warm smiles. They had done this many times before. They knew exactly how to stand, how to wave, and how to make everyone feel like they were being seen. But then something happened that nobody expected. A small head peeked out from the car. Princess Charlotte, who was 10 years old, stepped onto the red carpet. Unlike her parents who wore dark, formal clothes, Charlotte had on a bright yellow dress. It had little sunflowers sewn around the bottom. Her light brown hair was not in the usual royal style, but in 2 neat braids tied with yellow ribbons. Charlotte blinked in the bright sunlight and looked around at the huge crowd. For a moment, she seemed surprised by how many people were there. Then her face broke into a big smile that showed her missing tooth on one side. This was not the practiced royal smile that her parents had. It was the real, happy smile of a child. The crowd went quiet for a second, then burst into even louder cheers. Charlotte was a favorite with the public. She had a way of being both royal and real at the same time. People loved that about her. As Charlotte stood between her famous parents, her eyes moved across the crowd. She seemed to be looking for something or someone. Then she spotted an old woman standing near the front. The woman had white hair and held a small bunch of daisies in her wrinkled hands. Something about this woman caught Charlotte's attention. Without warning and breaking all royal rules, Charlotte suddenly left her parents' side and ran toward the old woman. The security guards looked shocked and quickly moved to follow her. William and Kate froze, not sure what their daughter was doing. The inside of Westminster Abbey was huge and beautiful. The ceiling reached up so high that Charlotte had to bend her neck back to see it. Colored light came through the big windows and made patterns on the stone floor. Charlotte had been here before, but it still made her feel very small. The royal family walked down the main aisle toward their seats at the front. Everyone watched them and bowed their heads slightly as they passed. Charlotte could feel hundreds of eyes on her. She held her daisies tightly and tried to walk just like her mother, with small, careful steps. When they reached their special seats in the front row, William and Kate sat down with Charlotte between them. The seats were hard and not very comfortable, but Charlotte knew she was not allowed to say so. Royal children were expected to sit still and be quiet, no matter what. The service began with a man in fancy robes speaking to the crowd. He talked about peace and working together and other things that Charlotte did not fully understand. She tried to listen, but his voice was deep and the words were big. She found herself looking around at the other people instead. Many important adults sat near them. Some wore suits and some wore bright clothes from other countries. Charlotte noticed a woman with a tall hat covered in flowers. She wondered if the hat was heavy and if the woman's head hurt from wearing it. She wanted to ask but knew this was not the time. Charlotte looked down at her daisies and counted them quietly. There were 7. She wondered if she should have kept them all for herself, or if she should have given some to the other children she had seen in the crowd. She decided that next time she would share more. The man in robes finally stopped talking, and a group of children walked to the front. They wore matching blue outfits and stood in neat rows. This was the children's choir that had been practicing for weeks just for this special day. Charlotte sat up straighter, suddenly interested. The choir began to sing a song about friendship and peace. Charlotte smiled with surprise. She knew this song. Her class had learned it at school. The words and tune were familiar to her, like meeting an old friend in a strange place. Without thinking about it, Charlotte began to sing along quietly. Her voice was soft at first, but as the song went on, she forgot where she was and sang a little louder. Some people sitting nearby turned to look at her with surprise. Royal children were supposed to watch performances, not join in. Kate noticed what was happening and gently touched Charlotte's arm as a reminder to be quiet. But William gave his wife a small shake of his head. He had a different idea. He leaned close to Charlotte and whispered something in her ear. Charlotte looked up at him with wide eyes, not sure if she had heard correctly. William nodded and smiled. Charlotte's face lit up with a big smile. When the choir reached the chorus again, Charlotte sang along, this time with confidence. Her clear voice rang out, not too loud but just enough to be heard by those sitting close by. The choir director noticed and smiled at Charlotte, while still leading the other children. Some of the choir children saw the princess singing their song and smiled too. It made them less nervous to see that someone from the royal family enjoyed their performance so much. When the song ended, everyone clapped politely. Charlotte clapped extra hard, making her daisies bounce in her lap. One flower fell to the floor, and she quickly bent to pick it up, worried that she might have damaged it. During the next part of the service, Charlotte tried hard to sit still, but it was difficult. The speeches were long, and the abbey was warm. She wished she could go outside and play, or at least stand up and stretch her legs. She began to fidget a little, swinging her feet since they did not reach the floor. Kate noticed and opened her small purse. She took out a tiny notebook and pen that she had brought just in case Charlotte needed something to do. She handed them to her daughter with an understanding smile. Charlotte took them gratefully and opened the notebook to a clean page. Charlotte held the small notebook and pen in her hands. She thought for a moment about what to draw. Then she began to make lines on the paper. Her tongue stuck out slightly from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. This was something she always did when she was focused on an important task. First, she drew her family. A tall figure for her father with short hair and a smile. Next to him, a slightly shorter figure for her mother with long hair and a pretty dress. Then she added herself in the middle wearing her yellow dress. She even drew little flowers on the bottom of her dress to match the real one she was wearing. Charlotte kept drawing while the service continued around her. She added her brothers to the picture. Louis was small and George was taller. She drew the family dog running beside them. Then she added a garden around them with flowers, trees, and even a small pond. It was their special place at home where they could just be a normal family. As she finished her drawing, Charlotte felt proud of her work. It looked like her family, not perfect but real. She wanted to show someone right away. She looked up at her mother and gently tugged on her sleeve. Kate leaned down so that Charlotte could whisper to her. Charlotte held up the drawing so only her mother could see it. Kate studied the picture carefully, her eyes moving over each part of it. Then she gave Charlotte a warm smile and a small thumbs up. This simple praise from her mother meant more to Charlotte than clapping from 1,000 strangers. Next, Charlotte showed the drawing to her father. William was listening to the speaker at the front, but he looked down when he felt Charlotte tap his arm. He took the drawing and looked at it with serious attention, as if it were an important document. Then his serious face broke into a smile. He gave Charlotte a quick wink and handed the drawing back. What Charlotte did not realize was that photographers with long camera lenses had caught this sweet family moment. They had pictures of the princess showing her artwork to her parents. They had captured the proud smiles of William and Kate. These pictures would be in newspapers and magazines the next day, showing a tender side of royal life that people rarely saw. The service moved on to another song. This time, Charlotte did not sing along but listened carefully while adding more details to her drawing. She added clouds in the sky and birds flying. She tried to make the sun with rays coming out from it, just like in her schoolbooks. A man in a dark suit came to the front and began reading from a large book. His voice was loud and clear, but the words were confusing to Charlotte. She tried to listen, but found her attention wandering again. She looked around the abbey at all the serious adult faces. Most people were watching the speaker, but some were looking at their phones or whispering to the person next to them. Charlotte noticed a little boy about her age sitting with his parents a few rows back. He looked just as bored as she felt. When he saw Charlotte looking at him, his eyes went wide with surprise. Charlotte gave him a small smile and a tiny wave with just her fingers. The boy seemed shocked that a princess would notice him. After a moment, he smiled back shyly. The large abbey was getting warmer as the morning went on. Charlotte felt a bit sleepy now. The voices and music seemed far away. She rested against her mother's arm and closed her eyes for just a moment. Kate put her arm gently around her daughter, allowing her this moment of normal childhood behavior. William glanced over and saw Charlotte resting. He checked his watch. The service had been going for nearly an hour now, and there was still more to come. He knew how hard it was for children to sit still for so long. He had struggled with it himself when he was young. He made a mental note to tell Charlotte later how proud he was of her good behavior. Charlotte opened her eyes and sat up straight again. She folded her drawing carefully and put it in her small purse along with the pen. The daisies were still in her lap, and she arranged them neatly, counting them again. There were still 7, and they were still beautiful. The service continued with more speeches and songs. Charlotte sat as still as she could, but it was getting harder. Her legs wanted to run and jump, not stay folded under her on the hard seat. She looked at the big clock on the wall. The hands seemed to move very slowly. Finally, the main part of the service ended. People stood up and began to move around. Some went to talk to friends they had seen across the room. Others lined up to speak to important people. William and Kate stood and shook hands with the people who came to greet them. Charlotte stood between her parents. She had been taught to smile and nod when adults spoke to her. Most of them said the same things: how pretty she looked, how much she had grown, how well she had behaved during the long service. Charlotte said thank you each time, just as she had been taught. An old man with many medals on his chest bent down to speak to her. He had kind eyes and white hair. He told Charlotte that he had known her grandmother, Princess Diana. Charlotte listened with real interest. She had seen pictures of Diana and heard stories about her, but she had never met her. The man told Charlotte that she had her grandmother's kind heart. This made Charlotte feel warm inside. As people moved toward the doors of the abbey, Charlotte walked with her parents. She still held her bunch of daisies in one hand. With her other hand, she reached up to hold her mother's hand. The floor of the abbey was uneven in places, with old stones that had been there for hundreds of years. Charlotte was looking around at the beautiful windows when it happened. Her shiny black shoe caught on the edge of an old stone. She felt herself falling forward. Her daisies flew from her hand. For a terrible moment, she thought she would fall flat on her face in front of everyone. Time seemed to slow down. Charlotte could see people turning to look. She could feel herself losing balance. She could hear a small gasp from someone nearby. In that split second, Charlotte remembered something her father had taught her about football. When you think you might fall, turn it into a move. Instead of trying to stop her fall, Charlotte used the forward motion. She turned the stumble into a small jump, almost like a dance move. She landed on both feet a step ahead, as if she had meant to do it all along. It happened so quickly that most people did not even notice that she had almost fallen. Kate, who had been holding Charlotte's hand, felt the slip. She looked down quickly, her face showing concern for a moment. When she saw that Charlotte had recovered, relief washed over her face. She gave her daughter's hand a gentle squeeze to say, "Well done." One of the security guards had seen what happened and quickly picked up the fallen daisies. He handed them back to Charlotte with a small bow. Charlotte thanked him with a smile. She checked her flowers to make sure they were not damaged. One had lost a few petals, but the rest were fine. As they neared the big doors that led outside, Charlotte could hear the crowd waiting. The noise was much louder now than when they had arrived. Word had spread about the princess and the old woman with the daisies. More people had come to see the royal family leave. William leaned down to speak to Charlotte. He reminded her that they would walk out, wave to the people, and then get back into the car. They would only stop to speak to the officials who were lined up to say goodbye. This was the normal plan that they always followed. Charlotte nodded to show she understood, but something was bothering her. As they paused at the doors, waiting for the signal that everything was ready outside, Charlotte tugged on her mother's dress to get her attention. Kate bent down so Charlotte could whisper in her ear. Charlotte spoke softly, but with a serious look on her face. Kate listened carefully. She stood up and whispered something to William. He looked surprised for a moment, then thoughtful. The two adults had a quick, quiet conversation while Charlotte watched their faces. William seemed unsure at first, but then he nodded. Kate bent down again and told Charlotte something that made the little girl smile with excitement. Whatever Charlotte had asked for, her parents had agreed. The huge doors of the abbey opened, letting in bright sunlight. The noise of the crowd hit them like a wave. Thousands of people were waiting to see them. Cameras flashed everywhere. The royal family stepped outside, blinking in the sudden light. The bright sunlight made Charlotte blink as they stepped outside the abbey. The noise of the crowd was much louder than before. People cheered and called out to the royal family. Camera flashes went off everywhere like tiny lightning bolts. William and Kate stood at the top of the steps and waved to the people. They smiled their perfect royal smiles. Charlotte stood between them, holding her daisies and waving with her free hand. She could see thousands of faces looking up at her family. At the bottom of the steps, a line of important people waited to say goodbye to the royal family. There were men in suits and women in fancy dresses. These were the officials who had helped plan the event. William, Kate, and Charlotte were supposed to walk down the steps, shake hands with these people, and then get into their car. But Charlotte had asked for something different. She had whispered to her mother that she wanted to talk to the children who were behind the barriers. She had seen them when they arrived, looking sad because they were so far away. Her parents had surprised her by saying yes. A security guard came to speak to William. The guard looked worried and kept glancing at Charlotte. William listened and then spoke firmly to the guard. The guard nodded and walked away, talking into the small radio on his shoulder. He was telling the other guards about the change of plans. The royal family began to walk down the steps. Charlotte held her mother's hand tightly. She was excited but also a little nervous. This was not something they usually did. They'd reached the bottom of the steps and greeted the line of officials. The adults spoke about boring things that Charlotte did not understand. She smiled politely and said thank you when people spoke to her. When they finished with the officials, William nodded to one of the guards. The guard spoke into his radio again. A moment later, 2 more guards appeared beside Charlotte. They would stay close to her while she went to see the children. Kate bent down and straightened Charlotte's yellow dress. She told her daughter to be careful and to come back quickly. Charlotte nodded and promised she would. William reminded her to be back in 5 minutes. Charlotte looked at the big watch on her father's wrist so she would know when time was up. With the guards walking beside her, Charlotte headed toward the barrier where the children were waiting. The crowd noticed what was happening and an excited whisper spread. This was not normal. Royal children did not usually walk into the crowd. People held up their phones to take pictures and videos. As Charlotte got closer to the children, she could see their faces clearly. There were boys and girls of different ages. Some were smaller than her and some were bigger. They all looked surprised to see a princess walking toward them. Their parents stood behind them, looking just as surprised. Charlotte reached the barrier and smiled at the children. They stared back with wide eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Charlotte said hello in a friendly voice. She asked them if they had enjoyed the service. The children seemed too shocked to answer at first. Then a small girl with red hair said yes in a quiet voice. That broke the ice. The other children began to talk too. They asked Charlotte questions about being a princess. Did she live in a real castle? Did she have a crown? Was it fun to be royal? Charlotte answered honestly. Sometimes it was fun, but sometimes it was hard work. She had to learn many rules and be on her best behavior all the time. The children seemed surprised by her honest answers. They had thought being a princess was like a fairy tale. Charlotte told them that she went to school just like them. She had to do homework and tests. This made the children laugh. They could not imagine a princess doing homework. Charlotte remembered the daisies in her hand. She looked at the flowers and then at the children. There were more children than flowers, but she wanted to share what she had. She began to give one daisy to each child, starting with the smallest ones. The children accepted the flowers carefully, as if they were receiving gold coins instead of simple daisies. Charlotte had given away almost all her daisies. She had kept just one for herself. The children were smiling and showing their flowers to their parents. Some of the adults had tears in their eyes as they watched this sweet moment. No one had expected a princess to be so kind and normal. A small boy at the end of the line looked sad. He had not received a flower because Charlotte had run out. He was about 5 years old with dark curly hair and brown eyes. Charlotte noticed his sad face and felt bad. She looked at the last daisy in her hand. It was the prettiest one with perfect white petals. She had been saving it for herself, but now she changed her mind. Charlotte walked over to the boy and held out the last daisy. The boy looked surprised. He asked in a small voice if she was sure she wanted to give it away. Charlotte nodded and placed the flower in his hand. She told him it was the best one and that he should take good care of it. The boy promised he would put it in water as soon as he got home. As Charlotte talked with the children, one small boy with glasses asked if she was really a princess. He seemed to think that princesses only existed in books and movies. Charlotte laughed and told him that yes, she was really a princess, but most days she was just a regular girl who had to do homework too. This made all the children laugh. They asked more questions about her life. Did she have pets? What was her favorite food? Did she like the same games they did? Charlotte answered each question honestly. She had a hamster named Biscuit. She loved pizza and ice cream. She enjoyed playing football with her brothers and climbing trees when the grown-ups weren't looking. The children were surprised by how normal she seemed. One girl asked if Charlotte ever got in trouble. Charlotte thought for a moment before answering. She admitted that sometimes she did get in trouble, like when she made too much noise during quiet time or forgot to tidy her room. The children nodded with understanding. They got in trouble for the same things. A security guard gently reminded Charlotte that her time was almost up. She needed to return to her parents soon. Charlotte nodded and said goodbye to the children. They waved and thanked her for talking to them. The boy with the last daisy held it up to show he was still taking good care of it. As Charlotte turned to leave, a woman called out to her. It was a mother holding a baby. The woman asked if Charlotte would like to see the baby, who was only a few months old. Charlotte loved babies and quickly said yes. The guard looked nervous but allowed it when Charlotte promised to be very quick. The woman held the baby lower so Charlotte could see. The baby had big blue eyes and tiny hands. Charlotte smiled and said hello to the baby in a soft voice. The baby looked at her with curious eyes and then did something wonderful. The baby smiled a big toothless smile. Everyone around them said "aw" at the same time. The baby reaching out one tiny hand toward Charlotte. Without thinking, Charlotte gently touched the baby's fingers. The baby grabbed her finger and held on tight. It was a sweet moment that no one had expected. The security guard reminded Charlotte again that they needed to go. Charlotte carefully pulled her finger away from the baby's grip and said goodbye. The woman thanked her for being so kind. Charlotte said it was her pleasure and that the baby was beautiful. As Charlotte walked back to her parents, the crowd cheered louder than before. People called out her name and told her she was wonderful. Charlotte felt happy, but also a little shy with all this attention. She was not used to being the most important royal. Usually, people paid more attention to her parents. William and Kate were waiting by the car. They looked proud but also a little worried. Royal visits were supposed to follow strict schedules, and Charlotte's unplanned trip to see the children had taken longer than expected. But when they saw their daughter's happy face, they could not be upset. Kate asked Charlotte if she had enjoyed meeting the children. Charlotte nodded excitedly and began to tell her about the baby with the tiny hands. She spoke quickly, trying to share everything before they had to get in the car. William listened with a smile. He was glad his daughter had a kind heart, even if it sometimes meant breaking royal rules. The royal family got into their car as the crowd continued to cheer. Charlotte sat between her parents in the back seat. As the car pulled away, she waved at the people through the window until they were out of sight. Then she sat back with a happy sigh. It had been an exciting morning. Kate asked Charlotte how she felt after her big day. Charlotte thought for a moment. She said she felt happy because she had met nice people, but also tired because sitting still for so long was hard work. William and Kate both laughed at her honest answer. Charlotte asked if she had done a good job of being royal today. It was something she worried about sometimes. She knew that one day her father would be king, and her family was very important to the country. She tried hard to do things right, but it was not always easy to remember all the rules. William put his arm around his daughter and told her she had done better than good. He said that being royal was not just about following rules and looking nice. It was about caring for people and making them feel special. Charlotte had done that today with the old woman, the children, and the baby. Kate agreed and added that sometimes the best royal moments were not planned. They happened naturally when you followed your heart. Charlotte had followed her heart today when she ran to the old woman and when she asked to meet the children. Those moments had made people happy in a way that no planned event could. Charlotte felt proud hearing these words from her parents. She had worried that she might be in trouble for not following the usual plan. Instead, her parents were pleased with what she had done. It was a nice feeling. The car drove through the busy London streets, heading back to their home. Charlotte looked out the window at the people walking on the sidewalks. Most of them did not notice the royal car passing by. They were busy with their own lives, hurrying to work or school or shops. Charlotte wondered what it would be like to be a normal person who could walk around without everyone watching. Sometimes she wished she could go to the park or the shops without guards and cameras following her. But then she remembered the good parts of being royal, like being able to help people and make them smile. Inside the palace, things were quieter. The family walked through the grand hallway with its paintings of kings and queens from long ago. Charlotte always felt small in this huge building with its high ceilings and fancy furniture. But it was also her home, and she knew which corners were best for playing hide and seek with her brothers. A lady in a neat uniform came to greet them. She asked if they would like some lunch after their busy morning. William and Kate said yes, and they all went to the family dining room. This was not the big state dining room where they ate with important visitors. It was a smaller, cozier room where they could relax. Charlotte sat in her usual chair and told the kitchen lady she was very hungry after all that royal work. The lady smiled and said she had made Charlotte's favorite lunch. Charlotte was happy to hear this. Being a princess did have some good parts. While they waited for lunch, Charlotte remembered something important. She had no daisies left because she had given them all away. This made her a little sad. She had wanted to keep at least one to remember this special day. Kate noticed her daughter's sad face and asked what was wrong. Charlotte explained about the flowers. Kate reached into her handbag and pulled out something surprising. It was the daisy that Charlotte had given her earlier. Kate had kept it safe all this time. Kate told Charlotte that she could have it back if she wanted. But Charlotte thought for a moment and then shook her head. She said her mother should keep it as a present. Kate smiled and tucked the daisy into her notebook to press it and save it. William remembered something and took out his phone. He showed Charlotte something that made her gasp with surprise. People were already posting pictures and videos of her on the internet. There were pictures of her with the old woman, with the children, and with the baby. People were calling it the daisy chain moment, and everyone was talking about how sweet it had been. Charlotte was surprised that so many people cared about what she had done. She had not been trying to be famous or special. She had just followed her heart and done what felt right. Now people all over the world were seeing it and talking about it. It was a strange feeling. Evening came, and the excitement of the day began to fade. Charlotte had played with her brothers after lunch, but she did not tell them much about her morning. They had watched it on television anyway, and they teased her about being famous. Charlotte did not mind. She knew they were not really being mean. At bedtime, Charlotte got ready for sleep in her room with its pretty blue walls and bookshelf full of stories. She put on her comfortable pajamas with stars on them. These were not fancy or royal at all, just normal pajamas that any child might wear. Kate came in to say goodnight, as she did every evening. She sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed and asked if she wanted to talk about her day. Sometimes Charlotte had questions or worries that she only shared at bedtime when everything was quiet and private. Charlotte thought for a moment and then asked why people had made such a big fuss about her giving away flowers. It seemed like a small thing to her, not something special enough to be in newspapers and on television. Kate smiled at her daughter's question. Kate explained that people loved to see kindness, especially from someone in the royal family. The world could be a hard place sometimes, with sad news and problems that made people worry. When they saw someone like Charlotte being kind and real, it gave them hope and made them smile. Charlotte thought about this as she cuddled her favorite stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear that had been with her since she was a baby. She asked her mother if she would always have to be careful about what she did because people were watching. It seemed like a lot of pressure for a small girl. Kate stroked Charlotte's hair gently and said something wise. She told Charlotte that yes, people would always watch the royal family. That was part of their life. But the important thing was not to be perfect. The important thing was to be real and kind. If Charlotte remembered that, she would be fine. Charlotte felt better hearing this. She did not have to be a perfect princess all the time. She just had to be herself and try to be kind. That seemed much easier than remembering all the complicated royal rules. Kate tucked the blankets around her daughter and kissed her forehead. She turned on the small night light and moved toward the door. Charlotte called out a question just before her mother left. She asked if they could plant daisies in the palace garden so she would always have some to give away. Kate smiled at this sweet idea. She said they would talk to the gardener tomorrow. She was sure he would find a perfect spot for Charlotte's daisies. Charlotte smiled sleepily and closed her eyes, happy with this plan. Alone in her room, Charlotte thought about the day as she drifted toward sleep. She thought about the old woman's happy tears when she received the flowers. She thought about the children's surprised faces when she spoke to them. She thought about the baby's tiny fingers holding hers. These were the moments that felt important to Charlotte, not the fancy clothes or the big building or the important people. The real moments of connection with ordinary people. That was what being royal should be about, she decided. As she fell asleep, Charlotte did not know that tomorrow all the newspapers would have her picture on the front page. They would not show William and Kate, who had looked perfect and royal. They would show Charlotte, who had been real and kind. The headlines would talk about the princess who stole the show, not by trying to be important, but by being herself. In her dreams, Charlotte was in a field of daisies that stretched as far as she could see. She was picking them and giving them to people who smiled and thanked her. It was a simple dream for a girl who, royal or not, had the simple wish that many children have to make people happy and to be loved for exactly who she is. In the morning, Charlotte would go back to her normal life of school and lessons and royal duties. But something had changed. She had found her own way to be a princess, not by following all the rules perfectly, but by following her heart. And that was the best royal lesson she could have learned.